A very good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayush, and I've been joined today by Shania Pereira to host today's webinar on understanding the registration process for plastic waste management rules. To ensure a productive discussion, let's understand some of the housekeeping rules before we begin the webinar. This session will be recorded for future references. Let's maintain the focus on the plastic waste management rules and the registration process. To ask any question during the Q&A, please put your questions in the question and answer section, and we'll answer your question during the Q&A session. To avoid any repetitive, please feel free to put in your question in the question and answer session and put it in the chat window. Please move on to the next slide. So we are a resource recovery enterprise. We enable businesses to take action to stop plastic pollution and meet sustainable development goals. Businesses can offset their plastic footprint by introducing ethical resource plastic into their supply chain. And we have a complete supply chain where the consumers, the producers, the brand owners, and all stakeholders of the ecosystem can benefit and contribute to the ecosystem of plastic waste management EPR compliances. Moving on to the next slide. Where businesses and the complete vision of Recircle is to see a world where no resources are wasted by pursuing and promoting ethical resource circularity. Moving on to the next slide. Recently, CPCB issued a notice on 13th of May, where they had extended the deadline for filing the annual return filing for FY 22-23, and the deadline for finishing the annual return filing is 31st May. While the portal is now operational, the end date for getting all the entities registered is again 31st May, and that's where we thought of keeping a webinar where we will understand our audience about how to do the registration process in detail. So before we go ahead and move on, I would quickly put the agenda across to the audiences, where first we'll understand the EPR policy, understand the overview of the rules, and then deep dive into the registration process by understanding step-by-step process registration. Moving on to the next slide. So a lot of you would have basic understanding of EPR, but for the larger audience, the EPR policy holds responsible the entire ecosystem of producer, importer, brand owners, and manufacturers responsible for collection, channelizing, and disposing of their plastic produce in an environmental safe manner. While in 2016, we saw the official publication of EPR policy, it has gone through various amendments where they introduced labeling and marking the thickness of the plastic packaging, the ban on single-use plastic, the introduction of the centralized portal, the SOP for implementation, and till the latest amendment, which was recently introduced, the 8th amendment. We'll move on to the next slide to understand the key highlights of the latest amendments. So during this amendment, one of the key amendment where the definition for the producers were revised, which included contract manufacturers and the manufacturers for intermediate material. Also, the liability for EPR obligation for small and micro-sized producers were exempted, but the registration eligibility was still remains as applicable as per the previous amendments. The importer definition was revised, where it is now specific to it includes commercial use only for importers of plastic waste, packaging, plastic packaging, resins of pallets or intermediate material. The next highlight of the amendment was the introduction of the latest category of plastic waste, which is category 5, the biodegradable plastic, and the the entire obligations for EPR in terms of biodegradable plastic will be accountable on the manufacturer of biodegradable plastic. The marking and labeling rules were also updated, and this needs to be adhered as per the Indian Standard 145, 1450, 534, 2023. CPCB also is now authorizing guidelines for establishing an electronic platform for trade of EPR certificate for between obligated entities, which is your producer, importer, brand owner, and plastic waste processors. They're also trying to now regularize the price for EPR certificate, which is going to be the minimum of 30% and maximum of 100%, which of their environmental compensation, which is around 1,500 metric ton, the minimum pricing, and maximum 5,000 rupees per metric ton. So moving on to the next slide. So while we have understood the highlights and the journey of EPR compliances and how the landscape of rules and regulations have evolved, now let's understand the overview of the rules, the obligated entities, and the type of plastic waste defined under the guidelines. So the obligated entities are essentially producers, importers, brand owners, plastic waste processors, and manufacturer and importers of plastic raw material. We'll understand in detail about the definitions of these entities, but moving on to the second part of the rules, which are the type of plastic waste. So there are again essentially 5 types of plastic waste that's been defined by the CPCB and under the EPR guidelines. The first one is category 1, which is rigid plastic. It is basically your tough rigid plastic, as in hard plastic. It could be your HDPE, LDPE, PP, PET. Basically, the nature of the plastic is hard. The second is flexible plastic. To give you an example for flexible plastic, could be your shrink wraps, clean wraps, any plastic material which is flexible in nature. The third category for plastic, for in the plastic category, is multi-layer plastic, where it is defined where more than one layer of plastic is infused together and used as a packaging material. So to give you a classic example for multi-layer plastic is your packet of chips, whether there's one layer of plastic, one layer of metallized sheet, and so on and so forth. So that's called multi-layer plastic. The fourth category is compostable plastic, and the fifth, which was recently introduced in the amendment, was biodegradable plastic. Now that we have understood the obligated entities and types of plastic waste, let's understand how the target is being generated. So essentially, your target is calculated on the basis of the average consumption for 2 financial year, which includes your pre and post plastic packaging. And from 2022 to 2023, now all the eligible entities are obligated to recycle their fulfill their 100% of their target. So moving on to the next slide. So while we have understood the overall obligations of the EPR obligated entities, now let's understand the key definitions of the eligible entities and their eligibility criteria. So producer is anyone who's engaged in manufacturing or producing plastic packaging, which includes your plastic manufacturers or contract manufacturers. Now, in case of producers, your registration obligations are eligible, but for recycling and recycling obligations, which are your EPR obligations, your micro and small size producers are exempted. In case of importer, now importer, essentially earlier the definition was not clear, but now with this amendment, the definition for importer is now clear. Anyone who's importing plastic raw material or goods which are wrapped in plastic, which are used for commercial use, are eligible as an importer for EPR compliances, where both their registration and EPR obligations are applicable for them. The third entity would be brand owners. So brand owners are essentially any entity which are selling the finished goods under the trademarked, registered trademark and brand label. In case of brand owners, your micro, small MSMEs are exempted from the registration. And anyone who's above micro and so medium and above are eligible for registration and EPR for EPR obligations. In case of manufacturer, manufacturer means anyone includes a person who is into the production of plastic raw materials, including compostable and biodegradable plastic. In case of for the eligibility of manufacturer, the registration obligations and EPR obligations are applicable. And the latest entity which has been introduced in the last amendment is sellers. To keep it simple in a way, sellers are traders, person whose entities those who are essentially trading plastic raw material. While they've set the parameters for seller, but the details and the obligations are yet to be defined by CPCB, where the registration obligations will be applicable, however, the EPR obligations are yet to be clearly defined. So moving on to the next slide. So while we have understood the basic EPR policy and the guidelines, the registration process, there are 4 stages of the for the EPR policy. First, where we register the entity as per the type of entity on the centralized portal. The second, where we upload the sales and purchase data for target evaluation. The third stage is where the EPR obligations are fulfilled by recycling as per the targeted figures issued by CPCB. And fourth, when we complete the annual return filing. So now that we have understood the stages of EPR compliance, I would request Shania to take over and educate our audience about the registration process in detail in step-by-step process.
Hi and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ayush, for that quick introduction and running us through the latest amendments and giving this a key highlight on these amendments and the overview of the rules and which all entities are obligated for the registration process. Now let's get into the registration process in details for PIBOs. So there are 3 stages to the registration process. That is your login creation, your form filling, and then your submission and payment of the application fees. So let's get into the first step, that is the login creation. So once you open the EPR portal, you will see a page like this where you have to click on register. Once you have clicked on register, this page will open up where you'll have to fill out the applicant type, that is if you're producer, brand owner, importer. But as Ayush mentioned earlier, if you're a small or micro brand owner, then you are not liable for registration. Then you come to the entity details part where you put in the basic details of the company, such as the legal name and trade name, type of business. So if you're a private limited, a LLP, a proprietorship, you mention that over here. Then in the type of company, you mention if it's a large scale company, a small scale company. And if you fall under MSME, then in the attachments, you put in the MSME certificate. And then you put in the necessary details like address and PAN card of the company. But if you're a proprietorship or a partnership firm, you can put in the partner's PAN card number over here. And over here, you can put in the SIN number if you're a private limited company or a LLP. In the authorized person details, you can select a authorized person from the company, not necessary they be a director or the founder of the company, they can be anyone. And if you put their PAN number over here, the name of the authorized person will get auto-fetched. Then you put in your login details where you can mention the email ID of the authorized person, and you create a password and then confirm the password. Now to keep in mind, if you are required to register, for example, as a brand owner and importer, both of these applications will require a unique mobile number and an email ID, so they cannot be the same. Once you've filled in all these details, you click on register. So when you click on register, you have completed your first process of creating your login ID and you have made an application. Once you click on sign in, a page like this will open up, like as seen in the right side screenshot, and you click on new application. Now the application form has 5 parts to it: part A, B, C, D, and E, where part B is only for producers. So brand owners and importers don't have to fill out part B, as it will not show up on your portal. So part A is where you put in the general information of the entity, the authorized person, and the plastic packaging details. Now we go to the next slide and look at the screenshot of the portal. So this is how the portal looks like. This is where you can see part A, general information, where 1A is the entity details. So this details would have gotten auto-fetched from your login page. You will just have to attach a soft copy of your PAN card and GST and then click on save. Once you've done that, you can come to the authorized person details, which again would be auto-fetched from your login page, and you would have to attach the PAN card and Aadhaar card. But the Aadhaar card is not compulsory, it's optional. And once you click on save, the next part in part A is where you fill out these details. So part in section 1C, that is where you mention the states of your production unit. So if you're a producer, you will mention that state where your unit is placed in. And if you're a brand owner, you will mention those states in which you're selling your product. One thing to keep in mind for this section is, now if you're operating in only 2 states, they will require 2 separate registrations. So if you had a production unit in Maharashtra and Gujarat, so a separate registration for Maharashtra and a separate registration for Gujarat. But if you're working in more than 3 states, then you will have to file only one application, which will come under CPCB. Then we come to 1D, where it's mentioned the total production capacity. Over here, you will write in the amount that throughout the year, how much is your production capacity that's taking place in the unit. And the number that you write here should not be more than the number that's mentioned in your CTO, that is consent to operate. Another important part is 4E, where you mention your capital invested in crores. This figure you will get from audited financial statements, so you can pick it up from your CTO. Coming to part section 5C, where you have to mention your plastic quantity consumed for 2 years, and it has to be put in category wise. Now, the amount that you put over here should not be less than the amount you're showing in section 7A that will come in the next part. The next section over here takes in the thickness of your plastic packaging. And once you click on save, you can go to the next section. That is, the next part is B and C. So part B is where you put in your consent to operate for your air and water. And part C, which is the biggest part of the application process, where you put in your purchase and sales details. Now in the screenshots over here, see in part B, CPCB has allowed you to put in, either you can put in your valid consent or you can put, if you're in process of getting your CTO, you can put in your application ID for that. So once you select the state and you put in your application number, your valid consent date, so your validity date will get auto fetched, and you can put a soft copy of your CTO over here and here, and then click on save. So once you completed part B, you come to part C, where you have to put your purchase and sales details. Now in 7A, this is where you mention your state-wise, category-wise pre and post-consumer quantity. So over here in this section, it will mention the name of the state that you have selected in the previous part. And then you come to the year. So you have to put data of last 2 financial years. Now, since we are in financial year 24-25, so the past 2 financial year data you would be putting is 22-23 and 23-24. Then you will click on the edit section, and according to what category you have, you will mention the total quantity in pre-consumer waste, that is purchase, and your post-consumer waste, that is sales. And then the total quantity will show below over here. Now, if you're operating, if in the earlier section you have mentioned multiple states, so each state will show up over here, and you would have to show the quantity according to each state. Now in part C, 8A and 8B is where you upload your purchase invoice data. So once you click on add, a pop-up will show up. But if you have to view your details that you have put onto the portal, you click on detailed view. So 8A is the detailed view if you're purchasing from a registered entity, and 8B is the detailed view if you're purchasing from unregistered entities. But as Ayush has mentioned earlier, CPCB recommends that you purchase your goods from a registered entity only. So once you click on that add button, these 2 pop-ups will show, where if you are purchasing from a registered entity, you click on register, and then you select the procurement type. So if you are dealing with a producer, brand owner, importer, that is what you select over here. And then you put in the invoice number. And once you've done that, the portal would have auto-fetched all the details. Now, if you're dealing with an unregistered entity, a pop-up like the below picture would show up. Over here, you would have to manually enter all these 12 data fields, where they ask you the name of the entity, from which state they are, the address, what plastic material type and category you're purchasing from them, and the total tons of plastic packaging. Now, in this part of the plastic packaging, make sure that you're taking the packaging of the weight of the plastic packaging and not the weight of the product you're purchasing. Once you filled in all these details, you can upload a scanned copy of the data and submit this. So if you made 10 transactions with each entity, then you put in all your details over here of that entity. Moving to the next slide, this is 8C and 8D. This is where you put your sales data. Now, as mentioned earlier, like in part 8A and B, part C is where you will be able to see your registered entities you have sold to, and in part 8D you will see all the unregistered entities you have sold to. Now, once you've clicked on that add button, these 2 pop-ups would show, where you can see over here, if you've selected registered entity that you're selling to, you can either select their registration number or the entity details. So if you've selected the registration number, you can put in their EPR registration number and a few details like the entity name, their address, the state, and their GST number would get auto-fetched. The rest of the details you would have to put, like the total plastic quantity, the GST amount paid, and the bank account number and IFSC code. So the bank account number and IFSC code would be yours that you would be putting here, not the person you are selling to. Now we come to the unregistered entities that you're dealing with. So over here, you have to manually put in the data where it's not like the registered ones where it will get auto-fetched. Once you've filled in all these details, you can upload the scanned copy of the invoice and click on submit. Now we come to part D, which, as I mentioned earlier, is only for the producers. Brand owners and importers do not have this section. This section mentions, requires details of your what is happening in your facility or plant. It takes in the machinery details, the production details, and the area and where the factory is located. Now, as you can see in the screenshot over here, the first question that it asks you is the plot area in square meters. So you have to put that in. Then the second, it shows you the longitude and latitude. The longitude and latitude, you can get that from the geotag images. Now, for every image that is to be uploaded on the portal, it has to be geotagged, otherwise it is not accepted. So for all your raw material storage area, your production area, the machinery pictures, all of those pictures need to be geotagged. Then we come to the machinery details. So all the machinery that is used for your plastic production, you will mention the list of those machines over here and their production capacity. And then you will upload the picture of the specific machine and you will click on save. Once you've done that, you put in your production details. So in the production details, it asks you what raw material you're purchasing and what type of a raw material it is, and then what are you converting it into. So it can be either LDPE, HDPE, PP, any one of the plastic material type, and then you can put the production capacity according to the plastic material type. And then you click on save. They also ask you the power load of the plant, which will be backed by your latest electricity bill. So you can attach the electricity bill and click on save. The last section in this part is where you upload your disaster management plan. So if any disaster were to happen in your facility, what all measures you all are going to take to overcome that disaster, and you upload the document over here. Coming to part E. Part E is where they show you the EPR target that is generated from the details you have put in part C. So it is from your purchase and sales details that your EPR target is generated. Here you can also, if you want to add more details and let CPCB know, you can add it over here in this section. Now, as we can see in the screenshot, 10B is where you can see the EPR targets, which is calculated from part C, that is your purchase and sales. So the calculation is like your purchase plus sales divided by 2. That's how the target is generated. So this is a automatic thing that the CPCB calculates. You don't have to calculate this. Coming to part 11, this is where you upload a covering letter. So your covering letter lists down the documents you have uploaded on the portal during the registration form. Part 12 is where you upload the signature of the authorized person. So they can just sign on a blank paper and then you upload a picture of that or a PDF of that. And part 13 is where you upload a self-declaration or any other information that you would want CPCB to know. Now in section 11 and 13, this details will go on the company letterhead and should be signed by an authorized person, and then you can upload the document and click on save. So once you've saved all your sections, part A, B, C, D, and E, you can click on I agree. Once you click on I agree, you can click on the submit button. So after clicking on the submit button, this is your third step where a checklist will be shown on your screen. So this checklist includes all the details of all the documents you have uploaded, just to make sure that you have uploaded each and every detail from here. So if you select no over here, one of these options as no, then your form will not get submitted. So make sure like all the fields over here mentioned over here are selected as yes. So once you've done that, you can submit the final form. After submitting the form, there is a portal fees that is to be paid. So CPCB has come out with a slab that depends on your target that is generated. So if your target is less than 1,000, then your fees would be 10,000. If it's between 1,000 to 10,000, then it is 20,000. And if it's more than 10,000, then your application fees would be 50,000. Once you've made the portal fees, your application would have gotten submitted and gone to your respective SPCB if you've selected a single state, or if you have selected more than 3 states, then it goes to CPCB for the approval. Once your application is approved, it takes about a month or so to get your EPR certificate. And once you've gotten your certificate, your application is completed and your registration process is done. But supposedly, if due to some reasons CPCB wants some extra data from you or something, they might reject your application. So when your application gets rejected, there is a late fees for the resubmission. But if you resubmit your application within 7 days, then it is free of cost. Otherwise, you would have to pay some percentage of your of the normal slab that is there to resubmit while resubmitting your application. So once you've received your certificate, registration process is a one-time thing. There's no need for renewal as stated by the latest amendments. But if you want to make any changes during, if your company name has changed or something, you can always write a mail to CPCB that you want to make a change in your application. Since we've completed with the registration process, I'll quickly run through a summary of it. So we have the login creation where you put in your company details, the authorized person details, and you make your login ID. Once you made your login ID, you have to fill out the form which has 5 parts, 4 to 5 parts, depending on what type of an entity you are. So in part A, the entity detail and the authorized person detail would have got auto-fetched from your login creation page. And then you put in from which state you're operating, the production capacity, the capital invested, all those details, and you put the pictures of your plastic packaging over here and your process flow diagram and your thickness of plastic. Now, the thing to keep in mind for part A is if you're a small or micro producer, section 5C that mentions the total plastic packaging, that will not be visible for you. But if you're any other entity, you will be able to see that. Now in part B is where you put in your CPO, where it takes in a valid CPO, or you can put in the application of your CPO. in part C, like I said before, which is the biggest part of the portal and which is the most important part, is where you put your procurement and sales details, which helps you generate the target that shows in part E. Part D is the most important. It's not important, it's only important for producers. So brand owners and importers will not, this part will not be visible for you all. This is where for producers, you will be able to see which will require your production details, your machinery details, everything about the facility that is there. Now in part E, like I said, here is where it shows your EPR target, your covering letter, your signature, and if you want any additional details or clarifications you want to tell CPCB, you put it in those letters. So yeah, that's about it for the registration process. Like I said, you will receive your certificate in about a month or three. Depends on which, if it's gone to CPCB or SPCB. Now I'll hand it over to Ayush.
Thank you, Shania, for taking us in detail about the registration process and highlights of the forms. We'll move on to the next slide and move on to the next agenda. Next agenda of the conversation today, and open the forum for question and answers. If you have any questions and doubts regarding the registration process, please feel free to put in your questions on the question and answer boxes, and we'll be happy to respond to it. We have a question where facility with your registration process. I'll personally get in touch with you after this webinar to guide you on this and take it forward from there. I think, Ayan, you have raised your hand. If you have the question, you can put it in the comment box, and I'll be able to respond to it. If there are any questions, happy to answer them. Please feel free to put in your questions in the chat box. We have another question. I'm through the registration process. Would like to know if as per the latest amendment, MSME exempted for filing annual return files. So in terms of annual return filing, there are no exception. Exceptions for producers and brand owners for micro and small size enterprise, where the brand owners are exempted from doing the registration and the EPR applications. But in case of producers, your EPR registration is necessary, while your EPR obligations are exempted, but annual return filing is mandatory. So there are no exemption for doing annual return filing. hope, Shrishti, that's I've answered your question. So I am so while you're running an MRF, um, do you also have recycling capabilities at your MRF? If yes, I'll personally get in touch with you after this webinar and understand how we can help you with your registration process. So to trade your EPR credits, the first step again begins through registration process and then trading it. So while it will be a larger conversation and happy to take it through on an offline mode, we'll definitely get in touch with you for your EPR registration for as a recycle. If there are any more questions, happy to answer them. Uh, so in the interest of time, I'll quickly take us through the entire the entire session of the webinar. So we essentially understood the basics and overview rules of the EPR compliances, understood the eligibility criteria of the EPR compliances, also understood the definitions of eligible entities, and understood in detail the registration process for the EPR registration for plastic waste management. I'll be happy to connect if you guys have any doubts or questions on an offline mode to and assist you with your queries. While Mr. Sunil also have a question, how to file annual returns? Could you please elaborate in brief? So for the annual return filing process, you again need to upload your annual sales and purchase data for the current financial year. For the financial year you're uploading for the financial year where you're filling your annual return filing, and based on that, your target is evaluated for next financial year and ensure that your credit compliance is fulfilled. So for your annual return filing, your credit needs to be fulfilled and your sales and purchase data needs to be uploaded, and based on this, the annual return filing is fulfilled. While Shania, if you can throw in some light about the return filing process for Mr. Sweet.
Yeah, so uploading of purchase and sales data is a yearly thing which helps you generate the target every year. So once you've done that, you can either buy credits from PWPs or other brand owners or anyone, and you can fulfill your target accordingly. Once you've done that, you're good to go to submit your annual return. This is just an overview on it.
Well, Sunil, I'll be getting in touch with you for this and take you through the registration process in detail. So at Recircle, we help with end-to-end EPR compliance services from registration to your EPR credits generation and fulfillment to your annual return filing. Uh, if there are any requirements, happy to be in touch. And thank you so much for joining today and taking out time on a weekend for understanding the registration process. Thank you so much. So we have another question. If nil annual return filing can be filled in case of MSME, uh, the annual return for MSME remains same across the process. Uh, if you don't have credits targets, then yes, it can be filled, but you still have to upload your sales and purchase data for the next financial year. Thank you so much for joining us again. Have a good day to all.
Thank you, everyone.